Hello friends, today we'll be looking at a beast tribe that has no distinct homeland and is quite dispersed across the realm. A people's group who are inherently nomadic and who carry their homes and all their belongings on their backs. They travel the realm collecting junk, restoring and crafting items, and peddling goods wherever they go. Today we'll be looking at the Goblins. The Goblins, a mostly friendly beast tribe that long ago interacted with the city-states of Idyllshire on a daily basis. Goblin goods were highly sought after commodities, and the goblins were always very eager to trade. This was all up until they vanished. One day, every single goblin just poof, gone, abandoning the cities with zero indication of where they're going, why they left, or if they'd even ever return. Of course they did, but it was several decades later. Now if you're hoping I'll be able to tell you where they went and why, I can't, because it's never indicated in any of their lore what's going on here with their culture. It's just something they do. My guess is that they vanished in order to not be in the absolute mess 1.0 of this game was.
Nightmare.
Now, because there's actually quite a lot of things I'd like to cover and a lot more interesting lore on these guys than most of the other beast tribes, I'm going to expand the normal categories I go over. They cannot adequately cover everything. We'll be looking at their physical characteristics, their masks, their diet, their culture and society, Idyllshire and the Illuminati, notable goblins, goblin speech, and finally their naming conventions. So let's get right to it, their physical characteristics. The Gobby flock are a very squat people with very large and flickable floppy ears. They have a perpetual forward gamer lean and forward rolled shoulders thanks to near always carrying a huge backpack. They have stubby little legs that, very interestingly, are either digitigrade, meaning their heels are off the ground and they walk on their toes, much like cats and dogs, or they could have an extra joint in their legs, or I guess they could just have incredibly bowed legs. That's an option too. I'm pretty sure most people don't really look at their legs, so probably haven't noticed how weird they are. But I'm a leg guy, so I noticed those curves. Their masks. Now, one part of their physiology pretty much everyone is curious about is their faces. Goblins are never seen without their masks. Like, ever. It is believed that there are actually hidden explosives rigged inside of all goblin masks. So if someone other than the wearer would try and remove the mask, it would trigger these explosives, resulting in the goblin's face being turned into an unrecognizable pulp, and likely either killing or, if they're lucky, severely injuring the person trying to remove the mask. These explosives are all also uniquely placed and triggered differently in each goblin's mask, so there is no way to know how to remove it without causing an explosion. So we can't just take off a goblin's mask. However, we do know what goblin faces look like. Maybe. We have two possible unmasked goblin art. Both are official from Square Enix. Firstly, there is the hobgoblins from the first. These appear to be what the goblins ended up being in that world. They're also based on the original Final Fantasy goblin art. So maybe this is what's underneath their mask. Though there are two problems with this theory. Firstly, they lack the floppy goblin ears. Secondly, just because the goblins look like this in one Final Fantasy game doesn't mean they all look like this. All of these are goblins in different Final Fantasy games. So the hobgoblin may be an entirely different beast tribe and just have a similar body structure. The second possible face is this official art from before Final Fantasy XI was released. Final Fantasy XIV goblins are identical in design to the Final Fantasy XI goblins. They have the floppy ears, and both games' goblins are based on the same design. But this is just concept art, and concept art is not canon. That being said, add their weird legs and forward lean, and then look at the Final Fantasy III goblins. I personally think this is more in line of what is behind a gobby mask. One last thing that's often asked about their masks: what's going on with it? Why do they wear it and refuse to be seen without a mask on? Well, they're clearly following the way of the Mandalore. Quite simply, wearing a goblin mask is just a part of their culture. And in their culture, they may never reveal their faces. Though if they're like the Final Fantasy XI goblins they're based on, they also wear and never take off their masks because they cannot stand how the other races smell. To them, you stink. And it's not just because you pass grey. You stink. And rather than near always vomiting whenever your basement dweller no shower stank ass walks past, they're like girls at an anime convention, forced to wear a gas mask. Which leads us to, what's this bulge for? It functions exactly like the beak of a plague doctor's mask. It's a pouch for various herbs and flowers. These then scent the air that the goblins have to breathe, giving it a pleasant odor for them. What herbs and flowers are used is really up to the goblin wearing the mask. The mixture of herbs they use often gives off the smell of tasty fresh food, goblin food, which probably means it smells really bad for us. As I'll explain now, segueing into their diet. Goblins are a nomadic people who travel the world. They eat a wide variety of food and often trade for and enjoy whatever the local foods are. But there is one kind of food they will always appear to prefer to eat: seafood. Goblins love to fish, and most of them are proficient at fishing to some degree. When they have to set up a camp to rest during their travels, they will always prefer and try to create a camp in an area where they can readily go and fish, cooking and enjoying whatever they catch. But of course, sometimes there isn't a safe spot to make camp near water. In that case, they eat the other kind of food they are expert at crafting and always have around: smoked and jerked meats, along with various other preserved food, all packed snugly in their backpacks. Well, what's so bad about any of that, I hear you thinking? Didn't you just say goblin foods are rather smelly and off-putting? Yes, I did. But I figured you'd like to hear about the more appetizing and edible parts of their food before I talk about their more unique foods and beverages, such as rot tea. The flavor of this drink has been described as something akin to drinking swamp mud and smells like stale, stagnant water. Other foods include nanka eggs, which is a ball of, well, eggs suspended in a sack of slime. Then there's the cheese. Good lord, do the goblins love their cheese. And boy are they good at making it too. Nobody knows what it's made of, and apparently it's better not to know. Plus the smell. I'll just let this description speak for itself. Yeah, it'll singe out any hair in your nostrils, that's for sure. Their culture and society. Goblins, unlike most of the other beast tribes, aren't really unified by anything. There is no unified goblin nation. The entire race is highly fractured into many different, relatively small, mostly nomadic groups. Each group has their own rules, way of life, agenda, and organizational structures. Some are commanded by a single individual with an iron fist. Some have elected council bodies. Some have hereditary leaders. Others are complete anarchy. There is no single structure within goblin kind. However, that said, there are some traits that are very prominent across the race. So we'll go over that. Starting with their religion and god, or rather lack thereof. Because quite simply, they don't have any. The vast majority of goblins don't bother with religion. And those who do mostly adopt the religion of other races. Yeah, not really much I can say on this point. No goblin god and a mostly agnostic race. Next common trait, their wanderlust. Goblins are mostly nomadic. They're all born with wanderlust and all desire to see all the corners of the star. So the vast majority of them are always exploring and always on the move, staying very briefly in some areas near a city or village just to stock up on goods and trade with the population before they move on. However, this constant moving wasn't all positive for the goblins. Since the goblins are constantly crossing borders, visiting new nations, they're always under new laws, regulations, and customs. And the goblins don't seem to understand this, so unfortunately there's often quite a few problems where they unknowingly break some laws or customs and insult people. And this has sometimes led to the goblins being imprisoned, or if the goblin doesn't come willingly, bloodshed. Fun fact, this constant moving across the realm helped spread knowledge from one civilization to another. The goblins would travel to and visit one city-state, learn and trade for their technology and expertise, then travel to another city-state and trade away what they've received and learnt, passing on knowledge and, albeit probably unknowingly, helping quicken the advancement of the realm's technology. Basically, during this time, everyone was, without even knowing it, sharing all their technology and expertise with everyone else through the goblins. Which leads us to the last common trait amongst gobby kind, their insatiable thirst for knowledge. This insatiable thirst is what made goblins so good at spreading knowledge across the realm. For generations, their trade and expert crafts helped bolster the city-state's technological prowess. They just want to know everything in regards to technology, and most would freely spread knowledge in order to learn more. Except for one group of goblins that the Warrior of Light interact with, the Illuminati. But before we move on to talk about these guys, there's one bit of goblin lore that I couldn't fit in nicely, but I also really don't want to cut out of the video. Goblin massages. Yes, this is a thing. Goblins have what is described as a secret traditional massage, and it is apparently incredibly painful to receive, with the massage also being, and I quote, somewhat embarrassing to receive. But once it's all over with, it is one of the greatest feelings you ever have. Here is a quote from Notched Bone, who received a goblin massage. "That hurt more than anything I've ever felt in my life, but I do feel very relaxed and limber. Those goblins are pretty amazing." I guess you could say the massage had a happy ending. Idyllshire and the Illuminati. These are the two goblin groups that the Warrior of Light has mostly interacted with. Idyllshire is an up-and-coming city created by goblins who wanted to establish a permanent home, giving up their wandering ways. The city values freedom above all things, and after you've gone and done some side quests, the city has but one single rule that all citizens and all visiting must follow. Always respect friends. And anyone who is welcomed into the city is considered a friend of Idyllshire. The goblins of Idyllshire also want to take this city and grow it into being a respected and powerful city-state of Eorzea. But for this to happen, it faces three problems. 1. Many of the goblins born in Idyllshire still have their natural wanderlust inclination. So naturally, most of the young goblins leave the realm to wander. So the city will likely never have a real substantial large goblin population. 2. They are harboring wanted criminals from the other city-states, which is a little problematic if you want to start negotiating as a political entity. And 3. The Illuminati. A very violent goblin clan. These goblins don't believe in the sharing of knowledge and seek to scour the lands for all technology. They believe that they and they alone should have complete and absolute control of all technology more advanced than a stick. The Illuminati very often turns to violence to achieve this goal. Any who do not bow, even their fellow goblins, are killed, and bowing is basically surrendering to becoming a slave, or worse, a plaything in experiments. So yeah, no surprise, the city that values freedom above all is at war with the group of dictatorial, murder-happy bunch of techno-hobos. Some notable goblins. There's actually quite a number of goblins the Warrior of Light get to interact with, each being unique and interesting in some way. But going over all of them would take a little too long, and looking at the length of my voice recording right now says this is already going to be a very long video. So instead, I'll be picking my 3 favorite goblins that I think most of you guys won't know the lore behind. So sorry, we're not gonna go over Brayflocks here. Quick Thinks, All Thoughts. The Illuminati leader and big bad evil guy in the Heavensward Alexander raid series. No spoilers here though, just his backstory. At first, he was a rather unremarkable, very low-ranking researcher within the Illuminati. Not terrible, but at the same time, he wasn't noteworthy. But then, during one of his experiments, a mistake occurred, which resulted in a violent explosion that took off all of his limbs. He was taken to the Illuminati doctor and had mechanical prosthetics implanted inside of him. Yeah, the Illuminati have the technology to successfully implant mechanical limbs. The now cyberpunked Quickfinks returned to work, but he was a drastically different goblin. His personality was entirely different. He was more charismatic and confident, and he was able to work his way higher and higher in the Illuminati ranks with his silver tongue, until one day he was on top, complete control. As leader, he began to enforce the policy of secrecy and technology hoarding. Before him, the Illuminati rule enforcement was more like, "Oh, you don't share, you naughty gobby. Tisk, tisk, tisk." Now, if a goblin shares technology, it's the death penalty. This led to a number of Illuminati goblins leaving the clan. I guess though I should make a very quick note on Alexander, since he's tied very closely to Quickfinks and the Illuminati goblins. Alexander is a primal, but he is not a primal representing a god. He's kind of like Shiva. Both of these are primals formed from an ideal an individual holds. And I'll leave it at that, since we're not going over Alexander lore. I just want to make it clear that Alexander is not a god, and beyond the Illuminati have no connection to the lore of the goblins. Most of the goblins don't even know it exists. Ratfinks Twinkledinks, the Illuminati mad experimenter, scientist, doctor, and all-around psychopath. He's not mentioned or talked about anywhere in the game, and for most players is only remembered as that one boss that squashes tanks with his Hulk smash punch. But the lore behind this goblin is actually quite chilling. See all these masks? All of these represent an unwilling test subject. Captured goblins or low-ranking Illuminati members that are past their use, taking them and turning them into chimera monsters. Yes, this Gobby is creating chimera like what the Alligans did. He created the Gobbledygorka, taking the eyes of the Arimon Voidsent and grafting them onto the still living, likely fully awake and not anesthetized goblins that he has to experiment on. The Voidsent would then consume the goblin's soul and take control of their bodies. That's something straight out of a nightmare. Another creation is the Gobbledygropa, another chimera monster created from goblins and a whole slew of other things. There's also the theory that he's the one who put Quickfinks Allfort's limbs back on, but before doing so played a little bit with his mind, turning him into what he is now. Yeah, this goblin doesn't get enough credit for how evil he actually was. If Quickfinks was the Illuminati's Zande, he was the Illuminati's Amon. Lastly, we're going to talk about the Goblin's Hole Picks. Wait, no. The Goblin named Hole Picks. A very unfortunate name. You can find good hole picks wherever you find cheap chicks. A motto to live by. Next is Goblin Speech. Gobbiespeak. Gobbiespeak is interesting. I kinda like it, but I guess it can be confusing to those who are not used to it. For example, a particularly heavy Gobbiespeak paragraph would be Uplander. Gobby has busy task with good quest prize of Jingleshine. Uplander go deaf dealings to big mouth slimy vines. 10 will be plenty much. Go go, no time for sitting on city parts. Busy task must be full finished by sunupses. Yeah, Gobbiespeak sentences are actually kind of fun, but can get confusing if it's heavily used. And some goblins use it a lot more than others. It all depends on how well they know the Eorzean common tongue. But Gobbiespeak isn't just strange compound words inside our language. It's a language on itself, which is apparently impossible to decipher. Not due to lack of trying. Eorzean linguistics scholars have tried and failed multiple times. They have dubbed the goblin language linguistic chaos and a right pain in the rear, because there is zero framework or rules. The goblins value individual freedoms over rules. So this has resulted in goblins often just making up words and improvising as they go along in a sentence. The only thing that could be discovered about their language is that it's incredibly heavy with compound words. Words that are created by stringing 2, 3, 4, or sometimes more words together to form a complex concept. For example, sword may be sharp pointy stabber, and bow could be twangy stick tosser, as well as a multitude of other things invented by other goblins. Though, thankfully, goblins never use their own language when speaking to other races. The only place we adventurers will hear their language is when we're in combat against them. When interacting peacefully, they will always speak the Eorzean common language. Kinda. Goblins, through their traveling, will often interact with different cultures and languages. And they do have a knack for picking up these languages quickly. They believe it is best to speak the language of the people they are visiting and trading with, but only to the certain point where the person can kind of understand them. So long as the person can understand what they mean, then that's all the words the goblins are going to bother learning. They can just Shakespeare up the rest of it. Just like Shakespeare, they will just make up words as they go along. Oh, I don't know how to express myself. Oh, I know, I'll just invent words. Wappened. Yes, that is a real Shakespeare word. Just one that never caught on. Kinda wish it did though, because it's kind of a fun word to say. But anyway, this is exactly what the goblins do. Just f***ing make shit up. Because who cares, I'm Shakespeare, f*** you, I do what I want. Hello, editing me here. I don't remember exactly what happened there or what the point was I was trying to make, but I'm just gonna leave it there anyway. Back to the lore. This knack for making up compound words bleeds into their speech and can get confusing. But just like Shakespeare, so long as you know the base words they're using and are listening to the context around the word and how it is used, it's not too difficult to figure out what they mean. Up next, we'll end with their naming conventions. So this will actually be a very quick section, as there's very little to goblin names. Much like most of their lore, freedom and individuality seeps in here, as well as mashing up and creating compound words from whatever they want. So yeah, this mashing together of words is not only in their speech, but also their names, both first and last names. So names could be Sing Socks, Fall Mix, and Lick Dicks. and surnames could be Finkforts, Stickquicks, and PowerPoint. The only general rule that can be found in their naming is that if a goblin is male, their name will always end in IX, such as Mutamix, Slowfix. INX is also used by Illuminati goblin males, such as Ratfinks. A female goblin's name will always end in OX, such as Brayflox and Round Rocks. And with that, we've gone over, well, a lot of stuff. Pretty much all that we know about the Final Fantasy XIV Goblins. I hope you enjoyed. Next, well, you'll decide. Will we be going over the Snake Lady Ananta, the Ninja Turtle Kojin, the likely very tasty Namazu, perhaps even the Lupin? Vote on the poll in this channel's community tab. Vote below in the comments, just let me know. The one I think people want the most will be the next tribe I'll be going over. But for now, goodbye my friends, and have a great day.